All right, here we are. We are live. It says right on the screen, you are live.
Thank God.
That's a good place to
start. It feels so good.
It feels so good. Whew, breathe it in, blow it out. I love it. All right. So you have joined us either live or after the fact on Modern Day Alchemists. I'm Joseph MoJOE McCarthy with Kristen Brown and Stevo Hays. What a joy to have you here live or after the fact. Because if you're watching, if you're listening, that means you are live. Woo!
Woohoo! We're all live. Let's celebrate that, shall we?
Good place to start. Yeah. So we're on episode 26 of the Modern Day Alchemists, which blows my mind. We've put in some hours here, but it never feels like work to me. By the time the hour's done, I'm like, what? Are we done already? But I like this. I want to stay here. I could live here as long as somebody brings me food. Hey, can you bring me some food over here? Okay. All right. So for those that haven't ever been to Modern Day Alchemists before, the intent of this group in particular is to take the wisdom that we've learned from our own experience and that the stuff that we've gone through and processed, and then share that with anybody and everybody who is going through your own stuff, not to tell you what to do, but to tell you what we've done, how it worked for us, and to offer a different perspective. And one thing I really love about Modern Day Alchemists is that we have three completely different perspectives here. And yes, we do agree on a lot of things, but we don't agree on everything. And I'm so glad we don't. That's one of the values of what our broadcast is about, is that we bring our own experience, our own education, our own perspective. And we may say the same thing in different ways. And I think that's really highly valuable as well, because when people are listening, words are it's the meaning that you pour into them. I've talked about this a lot. Words are very powerful, but the word I say and the word you hear and the meaning you pour into it may not be what I meant. And so actually the three of us are pretty good about just releasing our words out into the ether and let them land where they may, hopefully in your ears and in your heart, and that it'll bring some insight or some understanding or some empathy or something that fills your heart that says, hey, you know what? If they can do it, I can do it too. You don't have to do it our way, but we want to encourage you to say, you've got this. Your answers are within you, right? So dig in. That's one of the great things about The Alchemist, the book by Paulo Coelho, and I can hardly ever pronounce his name, is that this llama shepherd goes on this epic journey, and it's an amazing story. If you've never read The Alchemist, or if you haven't read it in a long time, read it again. But eventually, as with all epic stories, he ends up back home to find out that the treasure that he sought was right there in his hometown, which metaphorically means right here in our home, which is our heart. So that's a long intro, much longer than I'm used to do, but I'm so glad you're here. Thank you, Little Iodine, for tuning in already and sharing.
And Nora too. Hi, Nora.
Nora, awesome to have comments right here already. So if you are listening live, you can add comments to the StreamYard stream here, and some will show up on screen, some will not. Before we get into today's topic, I would love Kristen and Stevo both to introduce themselves, especially those that haven't met you before. Ladies first. Kristen, let people know who you are and where you're broadcasting from.
And you're going to make me show my book, so let me read it, because he does it every time. So my name is Kristen Brown. I am broadcasting from Phoenix, Arizona, and my title of myself changes constantly because I'm constantly in flux. So today's thing that I call myself is a spiritual and intuitive healer, author, and mentor, because I am all of those things. And what my mission is in life is to help people reset their self-worth foundation so that they can organically show up in life as a more empowered, centered, and balanced individual, and upgrade their vibrational frequency so that they can attract things to them that they want to experience.
Awesome, Kristen. And show us your book.
Oh, yeah. See, I always forget. My girls have already seen it. But this is The Recovering People Pleaser. It's my second book. I just published this in April of 2023, and it became an international bestseller in a matter of hours. And I've gotten lots of great feedback from it. My heart is in this, my vulnerability, my rawness, my embarrassing moments, all the things that I went through and healed from. So highly recommend this to anybody who is really wanting to reset that foundation. They know that they have unworthiness that's holding them back. And this book will help you to heal that, to move forward. Thank you.
Awesome. Kristen Brown. Okay, I'm gonna pass the mic over to Stevo, but Kristen, while Steve was talking, would you put your website URL into the chat for those who are tuning in. All right, Stevo Hays, please introduce yourself to those who have never met you.
I'm a people pleaser too. At least I used to be. I'm a recovering people pleaser.
Recovering, exactly.
Most of us
I'm a messenger, and I'm here to help. That's an acronym for I'm here to bring healing, encouragement, make people laugh, make people ponder. I'm a happypreneur that's here to navigate, activate, and advocate your happy. I'll help you turn it on, find out what it is, and then walk along beside you. And we're broadcasting from the greater Pacific Northwest today, Seattle area. And it's a gloomy and just away, Joe. I wish you just would have kept on going with that description of the Alchemist. Man, that was, you had me going, and then you're like, oh, I'm like, no, you didn't go too long. Keep going.
Well, as we talked about before we went live, any one of the three of us could fill the hour by ourselves. And so this is really fun because I feel like I've got these wild horses and I've got the reins and I got to hang on for dear life, right? And you guys are serious powerhouses. And I know you both are incredibly humble about this, but from my observation, what a joy to tap into two other lives who are really wide open to hear from Source, God, Universe at all times. And I've talked to you both offline enough to know that things come to you not because you studied them and you went to a class and because you were doing the academic thing, but just because you are open and intuitive to what actually is available to all of us. And that is that our creator, however you want to describe him, her, them, and I'm not going to get caught up in pronouns.
Oh, Joe.
Oh, did you lose me?
Yeah, you're getting a little fuzzy.
A little fuzzy. Okay. Well, I'll work on that later.
I'm going to leave that alone. There's so many things I could say right now.
I am a little fuzzy, you might say. Okay. And I haven't even been drinking. All right. But all of that to say, it's a joy to be here with these three. And I could go on and on about how much I love both of them, but you'll catch on as we go. I'm Joseph MoJOE McCarthy. I am hailing from Southern California, originally from Montana, and there's a lot of Montanan in me. As they say, you can take the boy out of Montana, but you can't take Montana out of the boy. So I got a lot of Montana in me here in Southern California. So today we're going to dive deep, as we always do, into what I believe is a paradox. And a paradox is when two seemingly contradictory things are both true at the same time. And I've heard this particular talk from so many different angles. It really intrigues me. And so I'm so happy to have both Stevo and Kristen to share their perspective on this. And here's the competing ideas. There are many, I hear in this culture a lot, that talk a lot about how important self-love is, how essential self-love is for us to both accept and to love ourselves is primary to us to being able to love others. And that makes perfect sense to me. I've gone through my own journey, and I'll get into some of those details as we go. And the competing idea, which isn't necessarily competing, but it looks like it's on the surface, is, and I'll take it right out of scripture, greater love has no man than he gives his life for his friends, that he sacrifices himself or herself for his friends. And then I immediately think of my own mother. Well, two, there's the one who gave me birth, who I haven't met yet, who sacrificed her body and her reputation to carry me to term. And then there's the mom who raised me, right, who sacrificed her time, energy, effort, her dreams, her money, on and on it goes, like moms do, because they wanted what's best for me. And I think there's such an important aspect to love that is giving away everything that I have and that I am for the betterment of someone else. So on the surface, these things seem to be a bit contradictory or a paradox. And I've heard you both talk brilliantly on both sides of this particular topic. And so I just want to throw this out into discussion. Firstly, we should define the term, so we're all talking about the same thing. What do you think of when we talk about self-love? That's really important. And then how does that correlate and integrate with self-sacrifice? So take it away.
Self-love and self-sacrifice. Well, I have a little bit different definition of self-love than that, because to me, self-love is the healing journey. It's the miracle cure to our relationships and our patterns in our life. It's the miracle cure to all the programming from the trauma and drama and all the things that we've all picked up and accumulated along the way, which is why I call us the walking wounded. I just want to address real quickly when you were quoting and saying that we have to love ourselves first in order to be able to love other people. And I want to add a little tiny flip to that, a little nuance to that. It's not that we can't love other people. It's that when we learn to love ourselves first and we reset that relationship with self and we make that a priority, what that means is that we start to heal. And when we love ourselves first, that improves our relationships. It improves the way we love other people. It's not that we can't love, it's that we'll actually improve the way we love other people.
Well, it's the same concept that a lot of comedians have used, a lot of people have, even speakers, communicators have used. But when you're in the plane and they go through the instructions at the beginning that no one really listens to, and they say, in case of an emergency, an oxygen mask will fall down, take the mask and put it on yourself first. And it just doesn't make sense at all. It doesn't make, especially if you've got a child next to you, your child next to you. But if you don't have that oxygen, you can't help them with their oxygen. And it's the same thing with self-love. That's what I hear you saying anyway, Kristen, is that if you don't love yourself, you're not a person. I always say a happy person is a healthy person. A happy person is their best. The happiest version of you is the best version of you. Let me put it like that. And so when we're loving ourselves, we have the desire, I think what's built in us, to love other people. But when we're stressed out, when we're not liking ourselves, it's very difficult to love other people. And instead of loving other people, we tend to compare ourselves, to other people.
It's good. So one of the distinctions that Kristen's actually helped me understand is the difference between self-love and selfish, because I think a lot of people are confused about this, that if I put myself first, then somehow that is a selfish act. And so, to use your metaphor about the oxygen mask, what I've seen is a lot of people buy that idea. The oxygen mask comes down metaphorically and they put it on themselves and they never take it off.
Right.
People around them are choking. They're dying for air. And you're like, no, because there's this innate belief that there's only a finite amount of oxygen. If I take the mask off of me and give it to you, then I'm in danger, right? And so self-love gets really narrow in some people's minds, and it really does become selfish, because they're like, no, I have to hoard what little resources I've got, even if that is love, because somehow if I give it away, it's going to run out. Now, that's a false narrative. I don't believe love is finite. Love is infinite, right? And there's abundance available. So I'd really like Kristen to jump in here and talk about this distinction between self-love and selfish, because I think a lot of people are confused about that.
Okay, so first I need to make a different distinction, a distinction between self-priority and prioritizing our well-being and self-love. To me, those are two separate things. And I just wanted to distinguish that first so that we're all on the same page based on where I'm coming from. So putting ourselves as a self-priority and putting our well-being first, right? That's the oxygen mask. That's so that we can then tend to other people. So we have to tend to our own well-being first, or else we're showing up a fractured version of ourself. So I call that priority, self-respect, self-boundaries, all those type of things. Self-love to me is actually a group of 5 tenets that I talk about in my book. So self-love in and of itself is things that we do to heal our inner world. And those things are, which, by the way, the self-priority will fall in one of these categories. So it is grace and forgiveness of self. It is compassion and acceptance of self. It is respect and protection of self. It is loving and supportive self-talk. And it is self-care. So what I'm hearing is that the self-care portion of this, the making sure, tending to your own needs first, which is the oxygen mask, because if we are not tending to our needs, we cannot wholly show up and tend to the needs in the full breadth that we actually could if we don't put our mask on. We're going to we're going to keel over, you know?
Right.
So I just wanted to clear that up first.
You know, and the part that gets me too, this whole thing is that, let's remember in the illustration that we're using right now, on the airplane and the oxygen mask, everyone has their own oxygen mask. And so I don't have to take my love away from me, my oxygen, to give it to somebody else, which is a great noble thought. And maybe sometimes that happens, but in this situation, there's enough love for all of us. We all need to have self-love. We all need to have self-worth and self-value. Me taking a mask off myself, it's not, I have to give you my mask. I have to give you my love. It's, I have to help you find your own, because there's enough oxygen, quote unquote, whatever that oxygen is. There's enough oxygen. We all have our own mask that we need to be putting on. And I only put my mask on so that I can help my child or the person next to me if they're having trouble getting their mask on. And I'm so happy we're doing this today, because I think, and we did it last week a little bit too, but there's a lot of people out there that don't know how to put on that self-love mask, the self-confident mask. And I think it's because the generations before us, it was always like everything was selfish. We played this false humility, right? And it builds us to a very negative, unhealthy place. But I think it's time for all of us we don't function if we don't have the oxygen mask on. And in the same way, we don't function when we don't function at the level we should if we don't have that self-love. We see that self-worth versus saying, oh, that's being selfish.
So here's a story from my own life that I think is actually coming clearer just as I listen to you two talk. So my mother, who raised me, she had a divorce when I was about 7. So now she's a mother of 3, and she's in Montana, single mom, gets a job. The job doesn't pay that much, but needs to take care of her family, right? We're living in a trailer park. And my mom, because of her love for her kids, would do anything and everything to make sure we had as good of a childhood as she could provide. And so in spite of the fact, very limited funds, and she's tired all the time, right? She's working full time and she's raising 3 kids, right? And so, but she sent us on weekends to go skiing at the local ski mountains. She made sure we had swimming lessons. She got me into piano at 4th grade, which, as you both know, turned out to be like life-changing for me, right? So all these things that were above and beyond her budget and her own resources. Like my mom couldn't teach us these things, so she sent us to get these lessons because she didn't want us to miss out on our childhood. But this cost her a lot. This cost my mom her time, energy, effort, money, etc. And my mom, well, she'd be if she was on this broadcast right now, she would say, I didn't know what I was doing, right? I was in my 20s and I didn't have great role models myself. And she talks very openly about her own woundedness. Yeah, that was still keeping her understanding her self-love at a minimum. So here's a woman who I know intimately, more than most people on the planet, who had very little self-love, and yet she gave so much love to her kids, right? And so the oxygen mask thing starts to break down in my mind. Like, she didn't ever put the oxygen mask on herself because she didn't even know to do that, and she's giving it to us kids all the time at her own detriment. Yeah. But I was like, how do those two things jive? How do they go together? And what you guys helped me understand just now, is that what my mom was doing the best she could with what she had, thinking that she had to take care of us first. But now I listen to my mom talk when we're all together as adults, and she starts to apologize that I wasn't there for you and I didn't give you the support, and why didn't I, and I couldn't, and all this. And my brother and sister and I, we always stop my mom and say, just stop that, right? You did so well. We're here together talking as a family. We love you. We're so grateful for all that you provided. And she has a hard time accepting that because of her own self-love issues. Yeah. But what dawned on me, and I'll make this as clear as I can, is that had my mom understood what we're talking about today, not only would she have cared for us as she did sacrificially, but she would have cared for herself as well. And there would be far less regrets now where she says, I sucked and I'm sorry and I didn't and I couldn't and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So here's an opportunity for us to say that both, it's not an either or, it's a both and. We can take care of our needs. We can love ourselves the way we're supposed to. By the way, a lot of people leave out the scripture when it says love God, love your neighbor. They leave off the part that says as you love yourself.
Right.
Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And in the Christian world, that gets downplayed for whatever reason, even though it's part of the verse, right? And so I just love that we're helping us integrate that self-love and self-sacrifice are not a dichotomy. They're not polarization. They can be integrated and must be integrated for the health and benefit of all involved.
Amen.
So good.
Very well said. I'm on the big screen, so I think it's my turn. So that overgiving is an aspect of people pleasing. It's wanting to make sure that everybody else is tended to first, and then we get the scraps that are left. And, you know, like you were saying, Joseph, there's someone's going to struggle and someone's going to suffer in that. So if we have the person that's just tending to self, then the kids struggle. And if we're tending to the kids, then the adult struggles. But also that, a little sidebar here is that when we overtend to the kids, sometimes we can create kids that are entitled and are running all over us or whatever. And then, you know, this further manifests down the road and even into adulthood. Right. So at some point we have to understand that the most healthy relationship is one that is called interdependent. That means that we tend to the needs of others as equally as we tend to the needs of our own. And this is tricky. And being a single mom like your mom, and we've talked about this at length, right. Joe and I have, that, you know, and that's a really weird line, because I was a business owner and a homeowner and had 2 kids at that time before my youngest came along. And there was a lot going on. And what I realized, and I say this when kids reach a certain age, because of course babies, we can't do this yet with babies. With infants we can take some time because they sleep a lot. But with, you know, when they're getting into that 2, 3, 4 toddling stuff, we can't really do this. And that's a little rough spot for us. But what we need to understand is that we do not have to overgive to give the message that we love. That actually when we start to take care of ourselves too, that we're teaching those children for future even, and anybody else in our life, that we matter. Yeah. Okay. So, and when we matter, we're teaching them to actually treat us better, because those children are going to turn into adults. Yeah. I had to undo some patterns that I set forth within my children because I was in my 20s when I first had them, and I was still healing and growing and learning. And I had to undo some patterns that I had set forth, because now things were expected of me that they could do. So my overgiving, turned around and bit me. Yeah. But what I realized is that when I started to prioritize myself in certain areas, and I didn't do it a lot because, again, single mom, but I did it in the most necessary moments when I knew that by prioritizing me, they were going to win. Yeah. So by prioritizing me, I got my 20-minute nap. I got my 20-minute rest. No one's safety is at stake, because they're at the age where they can handle this. It's not, I'm taking a nap with a 2-year-old. I'm not saying that. I'm, leaving them to their own devices. And then I could, take those moments when it was really necessary, because we do run around a lot in life, and there is a lot of, we're being pulled in 20 different directions. Like you said, the pianos, all the things. But just taking those moments, and even getting to the school 20 minutes earlier for pickup, so I could put my feet up on my dashboard and put on some binaural beats or something and deep breathe. Yeah. Just these little tiny moments of taking care of me helped refill my cup so that I had what it takes to give to them, because Kristen depleted was not the prettiest mama on the planet.
Right.
I was grouchy and irritable and all kinds of things. So the world does win when we take that time for ourselves.
So true. And that word interdependence is, but we talk like that, but our culture, our society, at least here in America, is so independent, right? We grew up, Joe and I, in fact, Joe, I think you were talking with Christina on a live talk last week or so, if I got it right. And you said something along the lines of, we were taught never let them see us sweat, right? Big boys don't cry. Pull yourself. bootstraps. And Joe, and you and I have talked and talks about this, but that's a tongue-in-cheek remark. It's
physically impossible.
They're making fun of that comment because nobody can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps.
Right.
We just can't.
Right.
But all those statements lent to independence. But when God created mankind, if you believe in the creation story, and if you don't believe in the creation story, this still works for you. But it says that when everything that God made, after He made it, He said it was good, and that was good, right? But when He made man, He said it's not good. That's the first thing He said. It's not good. But then He finished the sentence with, before you guys say amen to that, He finished the sentence with, for man to be alone.
To be alone.
You realize that we need to be interdependent. We need each other. And there's something beautiful about the fact when I can show you my weakness and you rise up, and you come alongside me and say, we just know that's how Stevo is, or we know how, let me help out here. Man, that interdependence, it's such a powerful word. And we got to stop trying to be the package in ourselves, everything unto ourselves, an island unto ourselves. What does that mean? Money?
Clapping.
Agree.
Clapping.
Okay. This is clapping.
Pay me now.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
This goes back to when people would be on stage giving poems and they didn't want to clap because it would disrupt the guy.
All the
beatniks would snap. Yeah.
That's right. I'd be curious to know, because on one hand, you could say that interdependence and all what we've been talking about so far is, that's people pleasing, right? You want to please people. You want to help people out. But, you wrote a book, Recovering People Pleaser. Obviously, being a people pleaser, we can look at that like, Joe, your mom, wouldn't you say that your mom really felt that she was loving herself by loving you guys, right? But the actual opposite was taken back, correct? Was happening.
Well, yeah. So, and I don't want to speak for my mom, and she readily admits, that she just didn't know what she was doing, but she knew that her number one priority is to take care of her kids. It wasn't to take care of herself. And so she was often, as Kristen said, depleted. She didn't have the energy to do what she needed to keep herself healthy. And so it's interesting now, even as you guys are talking, I see my own development where I adopted that model, right? I'll give all of my energy and my attention and my gifts, talents, abilities to help anybody and everybody that I can, and never stop to think that I should do that for me. Why was I not thinking that? Because that's what my mom did. That's what my dad did, for that matter. My dad's the hardest working person I've ever met in my life. And I've met easily hundreds of thousands of people, maybe 1 million people in my life. My dad's the hardest worker I ever met. He'd work. If he was awake, he's working. As soon as he woke up, he was working. And he would work until deep into the night. Why? Because he loved working? No, because he knew that's the only way he could provide for his family. So he too was sacrificing, doing just, head on as far and as fast and as hard as I can. And he never actually made a lot of money. Hardest working man I know, didn't make a lot of money because he was a mechanic and a farmer and didn't pay very well, but he did provide for his family, and he took that very seriously. So here's two people, they're my closest role models, who are giving. That is their number one. I'm going to take care of my family. So of course, why would I not naturally reflect that same mode? So I'm taking care of people. I'm a nurturer, caregiver, herder, shepherder, all that kind of stuff, right? But I'm never thinking I should stop and take care of myself first. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Kristen, is that considered people pleasing?
When we overgive at the expense of ourselves to please somebody else to get some type of result, yes.
Say that again.
When we overgive at the expense of ourselves to achieve some type of result that is based on, I'm sorry, I'm looking at you in the corner down here, the result based on approval and to try to fill our own cup, yes. Now, however, a father trying to provide for his family, I don't know that that's people pleasing.
Right.
Does that make sense? He just really wanted
his mom.
Your mother, I don't think your mother trying to be a good mom was people pleasing. People pleasing is when we do things at the expense of ourselves to get approval. Right. So if she was trying to be this big mom to get approval from the neighbor ladies, the ladies out there talking on the corner, that's some type of people pleasing ish, because she's trying to get approval out here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. I wanted to jump in though and say go back a little bit to what Steve was saying, because I could feel something happening in that moment about, and I'm going to get it wrong because I can't quote people very well, but you're talking about the needs and understanding that we all have needs. And I think this is especially important for men to understand. And I have a huge male audience and following. So any of them that are in here or going to listen on the replay, I think it's important for men to understand that your needs are valid, your emotional needs. Like, yes, we know men have physical needs and all this stuff, right? Mental needs. But a lot of times men don't give themselves the grace to have emotional needs. Okay. So men need to feel safe as equally to women. Men need to feel cuddled and loved and nurtured and protected as equally to women. This is like so incredibly important. So in the whole thing about, I wrote here, we all have needs. We all have healthy needs. And knowing that we can't always get those needs met from somebody else, even though it's great if we have somebody that dots all the I's and crosses all the T's. Oftentimes we can't. There's a whole chunk of needs that we need to give to ourselves. And those are needs that only we know that we have. Right. And we must become our own best friend, our own best guardian, our own best authority to recognize those needs and know when it's time to put them into place. And I'll use the example of me saying, getting off of work and being exhausted and going, I need 20 minutes. And now I got 3 kids and I just picked everybody up from their places. And now I got, oh my God, the whole evening thing is about to start. I need 20 minutes. That's me recognizing that need. Even if I had a man in the household at that time, he doesn't know. Right. I would have to say, this is what I need to go implement it, because to think that someone's going to mind read and say, you look tired when they're all full of their own stuff, why don't you go take 20? That doesn't necessarily happen because we're all wrapped up in ourselves. We have to be willing to advocate for ourselves and say, this is what I need right now. Now, I started saying that because of the emotional needs part. And men, it's very hard for men to say, hey, I need a soft place to fall right now. I need someone to listen. I need someone to hear me without judgment. I need to have somebody believe in me in this moment and this second that I'm not believing in myself. Okay. This is a hard thing. And I think women can step up and do that a little bit better. Not all women. Again, nothing I say is ever absolute. But this will reach the right women that are maybe being too hard on their men and understanding that your man's a human being too with emotions. And a lot of times we need to, as the sacred feminine, need to identify that they need that and start to provide that space for them. And I'll stop right there.
Well, too, when it used to bother me all the time when all my friends would talk about, not all my friends, but, I listen to guys talk about, the ball and chain and referring to their wife or their spouse or their partner, whatever, talk about, and that bothered me. But then as I started getting older, I started seeing another side of things, which is the side that you're talking about. Like, yeah, I've got so many, well, I don't have so many. I've got a good handful of friends that I want to cry talking about this, but what's new? I cry at everything, but, that love it. The reason I needed you, bro. I need some bro time. I need to hang out with you, bro. When I'm with you, I don't have to explain anything. And guys, we've got that friendship and I've got some friends. I know some guys that their wives get jealous of that. And when their wife doesn't ever allow them to leave or ever to, the guy gets resentful of that. And pretty soon,
yes.
And now we're creating we're creating division, right? Yeah. Go ahead, Kristen. You were on a roll there.
I'm a little fuzzy because I reached over to get my chapstick. I'm going to try to correct that in a second. That's exactly right. And then when the man feels like he has to go to the bros so that he can feel accepted, that's rough. That can be tough. But there's a lot of nuance and play in there too, because who knows how he's showing up for the wife too. So we're not going to get into all that right now. Yeah. But we should actually have a talk about that. But it is really important that we understand that we all have needs, and some we need to tend to our own, and some hopefully we have people in our life that will tend to for us, because it is okay, natural, common, typical, all the things to have healthy needs in a relationship.
And if we don't go after those needs, who is going to, right? Joe, would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
I mean, don't you have to kind of like, if we wait I know for me, I spent years waiting for somebody else to see my need. Then I get passive aggressive, hope they can see where I'm. And it comes to the point where if you've got a need, you got to tell somebody you got that need, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go back to my role model. My dad, who was, I would say, if you took Steve McQueen, John Wayne, and they had a love child, that'd be my dad. And I could never say that out loud because he'd kill me for saying that. But he was, tough as nails. He'd chew the nails and spit out the rust and wouldn't even blink, right? And I was so proud of the guy. He's like a superhero to me, right? He's like, yeah, he got injured a lot, but he never complained about it. You guys may have heard the story where he got his back crushed when he's welding, and the doctor said, "You will never walk again." And within weeks, he's back on his feet. He's like, "Who are you to tell me what I'm not going to do, right? You're not the boss of me." So here's this tough guy who I'm watching him, of course, and it's not consciously what's dad doing. It's because I'm a kid. He's my role model. But he didn't appear to need anybody.
Right.
And this is the way he was raised, of course. This is the way my grandfather was. Super, my grandfather used to drive cattle from Montana to California and back, riding on horseback. I mean, tough, really tough guys, the real deal, right? But they didn't talk feelings. They didn't need anybody, right?
Big boys don't cry.
Well, that was a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
If I admit that I need somebody, then I'm weak. And they grew up in a generation, you show weakness and you're just going to get beat to a pulp. Right. So, and my dad wasn't telling me don't show weakness. My dad just didn't show weakness. And so I picked up on, well, that's what men are supposed to be like. And so I didn't hear my dad say, "I love you," hardly ever, because that's kind of a girlish thing. He let mom take care of that. Right. I knew he loved me, but he didn't say those words until much later in his life when he kind of came to the realization, being the tough guy all the time is exhausting, right? And he needed, my dad still doesn't need a whole lot of people, but he certainly needed his wife. And he would say now he needs the love of his children. He wouldn't say need, that's a word he hardly ever uses, but he will say how proud he is that he's connected to his kids and what they're doing, and that they come and seek advice from him and that kind of thing. But all that to say, this really drills home what we're talking about is that have lived under the ethos of independence when really we're wired for interdependence. Right. Stevo's word. Interdependence is such a healthier way to look at dependence. People pleasing is codependent, right? So dependence is built into all these words, but being independent isn't the way we're wired. We're wired to be social animals. In fact, it took two people to bring us into the world and a whole village to raise us. But being completely so independent is unhealthy. Codependent is unhealthy, which Kristen's book is completely about, where I need somebody's approval in order to feel good about myself. Interdependence is really the best of all worlds, where I bring what I've got to the table and you bring, and we weave it together and find out my weaknesses might be your strengths and vice versa. And it's not a comparison contrast. I'm better than you, I'm worse than, which that never wins. But it's like, hey, look what we all bring. We bring a special spice to the awesome sauce. Or Steve and I have talked about the church potlucks. I don't know if you had this when you were growing up, Kristen, but everybody brings their favorite dish or their experimental dish to the church picnic. And so you've got 100 dishes on the table, and the kids all go to the dessert end, and we start there and work our way backwards until you get to the green beans, and then you stop, right? But it's not a thing where everybody has to eat everybody else's food. Everybody brings what they think is good, and then those who like it eat it, but everybody gets fed. And I like that, just that we bring our own special spice, and it's not for everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah. I was going to jump in there if you don't mind. I'm sorry, I'm still fuzzy, you guys. I'm trying to rectify that and it's not working.
I thought it was my eyes.
I moved to grab something and it didn't refocus on me. So I just don't want to distract. What's that?
That's what you get for calling Joe fuzzy earlier before we started.
I'm just trying not to distract from you guys, because there's things I can do, but it takes me doing this a couple times and then it'll focus, but it's not doing it. Anyway, I just want to do a little bit of clarity of terms.
Please, yes.
Because a little dependency is healthy and independence is healthy as well. It's when we go on the hyper of either side of that it's the problem. So when we become hyper dependent, that turns into codependency. And we become hyper independent, we can often turn into narcissistic type things where it's all about us and only about us. So it's really about the balance. And, this can be hard for some people at first based on how much they have, how deep their programming is, how much self-love work they've done, how much healing work they have done. Because at first, if we just try to muscle our way through this, it feels extremely awkward and it's very difficult, and we cannot hold that line because the minute someone comes in and just gives us a little bit of guilt, we fold, right? Because we don't yet, on the inside, on the true foundation of us, we don't have that worthiness and that I matter feeling inside yet. So the little second somebody comes, we're like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try to take care of myself and put me first. Then someone comes in, guilts us, manipulates us, does all those things. We fold. So it's about really, it's kind of like a both and, like you were saying. It's about starting to step forward in life and really start to put yourself as a priority, make your well-being matter, as equal to starting to heal your self-worth and your I don't matter wound to make yourself matter. When you do those things together at the same time, you grow and you start to show up in the world in a way that is healthier. Okay. Because a lot of people, narcissistic type people, selfish people get so much slack. Well, people pleasers are just equally as dysfunctional. Okay. So it's about really trying to find that center between the two polarities, which I've talked about before, is right smack in the middle, where we tend to our own needs and we allow others to tend to our needs, and we tend to others' needs. Like, we just have this nice little balance. And you can tell when you're out of balance because you are going to emotionally feel it. And that's why in my book, I talk at length about the emotional guidance system, because that is our indicator. That is our guidepost. Anytime an emotion comes up, if we're starting to feel bitter or resentful or overly frustrated or irritated all the time, we must self-inquire. What is causing this feeling? Because all it is a little flag being raised in our psyche saying, look at me, something's out of balance.
Right.
And in order to get back to homeostasis, we just need to inquire, why am I so irritable? Because I haven't had 5 minutes to myself. Right. Oh, so what's the cure? I need to go spend some time with myself. Yeah. I'll leave it there. Yeah. And I'm going to try to fix this, you guys. So
well said. And I think that's life. Life is it's not like we can get, we're in a performance-based society, right, Joe? So we're always like, you know, oh, I'm out of balance again. No, life is always being out of balance. Life is always trying to figure out, you use the word homeostasis, but life is always trying to get to that point of balance. And our emotions are actually trying to help us with that. We see the negative emotions, we call them negative emotions, but anger is trying to be our friend. Pain is trying to be our friend. It's trying to tell us something is up, pay attention, let's adjust to this whole thing, right? And so I just want to let you guys know that are listening, that are watching, is that we're constantly, no one gets it perfect all the time. We're constantly monitoring and adapting. And this whole journey of self-love, I think that's what it looks like. It's constantly fixing our perception, our perspective, our, you know, and realizing, I mean, that's life. It's not what Louis L'Amour, that famous Western author, said, it's not the end of the trail that's the thing, it's the journey itself. It's a trail itself. That's the thing.
I saw your hand, Kristen, before I go to you, I just want to talk about balance for a little bit, because you hear this a lot. People say the ideal is balance. The goal is balance. I'm of the opinion that I think there's a higher calling than balance, and that's harmony. And I'll get to that. But Kristen, you and I have talked a lot about how one of the universal laws of nature is that everything's always in motion. So whether you go down to the quantum level, where the little quarks are appearing and disappearing, right, in the Higgs boson and blah, 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 all the way up to the cosmic level, where planets and stars are constantly in flux. The sun itself looks like it's stable, but if you zoom in, you find out it's exploding all the time, right? And things are in orbit and they're oscillating. So everything's in motion, everything in the whole universe. And so I think, well, balance or homeostasis, which is the same thing, is when everything stops. You get the equal amount on both sides. And I'm like, well, life doesn't really operate that way. Life operates like out of balance all the time, but it's the striving for balance that you swing one way and then you swing back. Or as I like to say, you orbit around center, or if you're a what's the timing thing?
That thing, that clock thing.
Metronome, right? The metronome. It goes through center, but it goes past. It goes through center and it goes past. And sometimes it goes really fast. Sometimes it really goes through slow. All of that to say, I think those are indicators. Nature is an indicator that we're striving for balance. But when we make the judgment, I'm not in balance, so I suck. Well, that's not reality, because everything's in motion. Right. So you go past center, and then you come back and you go past center the other way, and then you come back. And all of this is part of the journey, the orbit, the oscillation, the vibration. People use this word all the time, right? That we're always in flux. But the key for me, as I'm learning, is evaluation, awareness, and then course correction. Okay, suddenly I'm Pluto and I'm way out, away from the sun, and I think I'm lost in the dark. Guess what? Pluto always comes back. It always comes back around, right? And so it's an idea to me is trying to reduce the extremes where I'm so far away from center, and then I wake way back, and I go far all the other way, and making those motions less and less extreme, so I'm closer to the center all the time. I think that's a sign of maturity and enlightenment.
And like when you see the movies, I remember seeing a movie once where I'm like, it's fake. He's driving a car. It's fake. I'm like, why does that look fake? Well, it dawned on me. It's because he just had his hands on the steering wheel like this. And no one gets on the highway and just, okay, we got the steering wheel. Now we can do whatever because it's a straight road, right? No, you're constantly, when you're driving, that's life. That's what you're talking about, Joe. You're constantly, and no one gets on the road and goes, oh, I don't want to drive. I don't want to drive down to Disney today. I don't want to drive and see my parents, my family today. I don't want to drive because I got to constantly adjust. Are you kidding me? We don't even think about it when we're in the car. And really, when you don't adjust, that's when you got to really course correct, right? I think the key is to constantly be doing this. If you're constantly doing this and you're keeping that metronome, that grandfather clock, I like to say, but you're keeping the thing right. But when you just ignore it and say, okay, I'm in balance, man, you're going to go way far over here. Then you got to react. And I feel like we've got a lot going on today where we're overreacting, and I just think it's constantly that.
Yeah.
So I have a couple things that I want to add to that. One was back with what Stevo was saying earlier, but since we're on this part, this is the way I explain it, is that I see life as kind of a pendulum, and you touched on this, Joseph, where we can swing one side. I'm so upset, angry, depressed, mad, da da da. I'm so happy, elated, and da 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 da. Right, and we just do this whipsawing thing. Yeah. I've used this analogy for years. I like to stay right here in the middle, right? Where it's still doable. I'm not way over here, and I'm not way over here. But I'm right here in the middle. And this also reminds me of, as you were talking, Stevo, this came up for me. So if you go to the gym, there's this thing, I don't even know what it's called, where there's like a tube, and then people put a wooden plank on top of it. Yep. And then you could stand on the wooden plank and you're doing this, right? Or you can do this and stop. Or you do that and stop. But you're trying to stay right. And there comes a point where you can find this, but then it just starts to go a little bit again, because this is life.
Yes.
So we have to be willing to move and flow. My goal is always to find my center as best as I can and give myself grace, self-love, by the way, y'all, that's self-love. I'm giving myself grace as I'm finding my center, because something might happen that floors me a little bit. At this stage in my game, I don't really get floored too much yet. If I don't tend to that thing that happened, then another one, then another one, then another one, then I'm getting way out of balance. So if I'm like, well, this kind of, rocked my world a little bit, I will tend to that thing so that I can stay back in balance. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going up here where the pendulum is high, and I just kind of stay right here. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that Stevo talked about negative emotions, and I think this is something we need to put an exclamation point on, because I talk about this in my book, and it's something I had never heard before. It's something that my heart came to me through my heart, and I thought, I'm just going to throw this in my book, whether people like it or not. And I started off in that chapter talking about positive and negative emotions, because this is how the world relates. So I bring in the language of the world because, I know what a positive emotion is. I know what a negative emotion is. And then I flip that entire that narrative, and I say, there is no positive or negative emotions. There is just emotions. Okay, because to say something is negative means that it is bad for you and it is not serving you. So instead, I restate this to say there is better feeling emotions, lighter, airier feeling emotions like happiness, joy, contentment. And then there are heavier and denser feeling emotions. But neither emotion is wrong. There is no wrong emotion ever. They're just, some feel a little better than the others, but they're all bringing us information. The lighter area emotions are telling us when we're thinking good and things are on path and things are feeling nice. And the heavier, denser emotions means maybe our thinking is out of whack. Maybe we're in some type of suffering thinking, some type of suffering pattern in our life. And so when that emotion comes up, it's merely just to go, okay, I see you. And now I see what I've been doing. And so, like we've talked about, that we can course correct.
Yeah.
Hi, Noble Ron.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about here, Kristen. And so this really hits home for me personally. For whatever reason, a lot of it to do with the trauma of my own experience, and my belief system, which I think was very skewed. I did label my negative emotions. I labeled it as sin, right? That if I was going to be angry, if I was going to be pissed, if I was going to be
Wow.
feel hatred towards someone, what I would term negative emotions, it got really difficult when I take it into a religious context, and I think that God's not happy with me if I'm feeling these emotions.
Yeah.
So what I did, as I look back, and this is unhealthy, and I just want to bring it to people's attention in case you land in this bucket, is that if the baseline emotions was just calm and peace, I could feel all the emotions above the line. I could express them: exuberance, joy, happiness, crazy, enthusiastic, all the stuff that I thought was okay. I could full on, because some people say, well, if you don't feel the negative emotions, you can't feel the high ones. I'm saying, I don't believe you, because I did for years.
Agree, yeah.
I felt all the great, quote unquote, good emotions full on. I was living there, right? But when I came down the hill and hit the line of peace, where it went into what I would call negative or bad emotions, I cut it off, sometimes consciously and sometimes unconsciously, because I thought that's evil, that's bad, that's sinful, right? So I wouldn't feel angry. I wouldn't feel the negative emotions. And as I look back now, I realized I was only living half of a human life, because humanity is above and below the line. And that, by the way, if God created us, and not everybody believes in the God as the creator, but I'm just saying, if the creator, if the grand designer that created us to have all the full range of emotions, then why would he call half of the emotions sinful, right? That was my misinterpretation, perhaps from what I was taught, from what was modeled, etc. So I went through all of life. I didn't cry for 30 years. Not that I thought crying was evil, but because it was attached to a negative emotion. Because my stepdad, who I didn't like, caused me to cry so many times, I just cut that off. And I couldn't feel negative towards him. I couldn't feel hate towards him. I couldn't feel anger towards him. So I was just living only on the hills, never in the valleys. And I found out I actually cut off half of my humanity, right? And so now I get to the point where I'm like, that was a very limiting belief system. I don't think it was even biblical, as I did at one time, right? I believe God created us with the full spectrum of emotions, as has been said in many different ways in this episode alone, to give us an indication of, hey, something's amiss here, right? When you go to the doctor and you say, I'm feeling pain, the doctor doesn't say, well, your body isn't working right. He says your body's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, is telling you that something needs to be fixed, right?
Yeah.
So yes, Kristen, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was just gonna now I forgot what I was gonna say. Darn it. Looking back at that, Joseph, when you weren't expressing, do you see how it kept you stuck in life by not recognizing the lower dense emotions?
Yeah. So here's where it would play out and get me stuck, especially my dating life, right? So date somebody for a month or two, and pretty soon, inevitably, the girl would ask, do you ever cry? Are you ever sad? Is there anything that ever bothers you? And at first it was like a badge of honor. Nah, I'm impervious to that, right? I'm a superhero inside. That's what I would think. But what I realize now is that they're like, I can't fully relate to you, Joe, because I love the positivity about you. I love all that you bring to the relationship, but if I'm going to connect it with you on a deeper level, I need to see that you're human, that you're hurt, that you're scared, that you have pain. And I'm like, well, I don't have those things, so I just like me for who I am. Why are you judging me? all the crazy stuff that goes on. But so I could get by a series of dating relationships like that, but get into a marriage, now it's a whole other story, right? Where my wife is saying, I don't even believe you, Joe, right? I think you believe you, but I don't believe you, because it's not human, right?
Yeah.
To not feel anything that's negative. And she actually has been a great role model for me to express all of her emotions. Where at first I'm like, no, it's too much, and I don't like it, and it's conflict, and I'm going to avoid conflict. I'm the peacemaker, and I overlaid all this good and bad judgment over it. Where it's just human, right? And it's a good thing to fully express all of my humanity, to feel it all, and know that that's the way I'm designed for a purpose, for a reason.
So good.
You guys are rocking it, man. I'm loving this. This is so.
Can we do a talk on men's emotions? Because I feel like
You
this
don't
is
have
like
Ooh, easy
this
now.
is one of
yeah,
my
slow down.
Good.
Whoa.
this is one of my missions, because men really need to be given the permission to, talk about their emotions. And also I'm just thinking too that women's emotions can really overwhelm men. And just there's a lot of nuance to this. I just think it would be really helpful.
Yeah. So
I think too is that one thing I grew up in the church. My dad was a pastor. I was born one minute, I was in church the next. I teased on the pews. I remember when there were pews, all that stuff, right? The wooden benches. But the thing that always used to bother me, and it was the hardest time for me to go to Happy Life Studios, to create Happy Life Studios, because I used to go to church and I hated it when no one would tell you the negative emotions. Every time, how are you doing? They would say, "Oh, I'm doing great. I'm fine. I'm fine." And we do that in the world too. And it's a pet peeve of mine. Don't tell me fine. At least come up with a creative solution. Give me another word. Tell me you're infatuated. Tell me, but don't just give me fine. That means you turned your brain off. You're not really answering my question. But when there was negative emotions, Joe, what was the term? You might even know, Kristen, but when you ask someone how they're doing and they're not doing well, what positive word will they put in its place, right? They'd say, "Oh, I'm blessed. I'm blessed." I'm like, we're all blessed, right?
It's like, bless your heart. Bless your heart.
So you're saying I'm not? Yeah, bless your heart. That's like saying, F you, screw you, right? Bless your heart. That's a good way to say. I mean, that word is not what blessed is supposed to be, And there's oftentimes, and this has happened many times to me, but I'll look them in the eye and I'll say, "No, how are you really?"
I
You
do
guys
too.
that are listening right now, and I can't tell you how many times, I don't know if it's happened to you, Kristen, but many times they start to break down because no one takes the time to ask them. No, I really want to know. I'm not saying hi. I did a podcast on this. I'm like, if you're trying to say hi, then say hi. Don't say how you doing. Say hi. But if you want to know how I'm doing, then ask me how I'm doing. But don't be surprised when I give you the answer that's not blessed.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's when we share our pain and our struggle with each other, there
We
isn't
connect.
a higher. Right? Exactly. There's not a higher compliment you can give to somebody. There's not a higher intimacy than when you say, "I'm struggling. I trust you enough to tell you."
Yeah. So we're only have a few minutes left here, and we can talk at length about this, as you can tell, and we will talk more about it in future podcasts. But in closings, I'd like each of you to kind of answer the question, why does it matter? Now, we can go a whole another hour on this, and we probably will, but we've described self-love and helped define it, and why we've kind of screwed with that idea, or it's been screwed up in my head for so many years. And I actually put in the question in the title of our broadcast, why does it matter? I think we've answered that to some degree, but what I didn't realize until I'm listening to you guys talk is that part of the answer is built into that question. Why does it matter? Take off the T on it. Why do I matter? Because Kristen touched on the worthiness and enoughness type of thing. And I look back at my parents, my mom and dad, who loved me sacrificially, provided a life for me at their own expense, but neither one of them had a sense that they mattered, right? They're still struggling with their own sense of value. And I think that they did get some value out of, as they look at us, and that we're not in jail or in prison or dead. That's a good thing. But I don't think they ever understood that they mattered in the equation. It was just, what could they do for somebody else? So, I mean, we don't have any time here to talk it, but just to give like an appetizer for another talk, why do you matter, Stevo? Why do you matter, Kristen? Why do the people who are listening, why do they matter in this equation?
Well, to be real quick, that's all I would say. You already answered it. Why does it matter? Because you matter, right? The world needs you to be you. You're in this world for a reason. There is a reason you are alive and you matter, and your healthy you is your best you, right? And that doesn't mean we can't ever be unhealthy, but when we're unhealthy, we need to get healthy by reaching out to people. I'm going too long now. I would just simply say, why does it matter? Why does self-love matter? Because you matter. We need you. Your world, the people around you, honestly, they need you, and they need you to be your healthy you, your self-love you. Not to mention, when you're unhealthy, it takes a lot of effort. When you're sick, it takes a lot of effort, right? So when you're people pleasing, or when you're, whatever, we talk about the pendulum there, when we're trying to be all independent and try to be our own person, that'll wear you out, right? Interdependence, when you rely on other people, it's freeing, and it matters because you matter.
So on the tiniest foundation, the one sand in the cement of our foundation that matters the most is that we're a child of God, that we are daily individuated. There is no one who has been here before. There's no one who's going to be here after us. There's no one with our set of unique experiences, gifts, talents, DNA. We matter because we're here, and God doesn't make mistakes. So, but only we get to deem ourselves as mattering. A lot of times we want to have the outside world reflect that back to us. So we're bending and morphing and shifting, people pleaser, trying to get someone to reflect that back to us. And that's an empty cup, and it will never get filled, ever, by outside accolades. What will get filled is when we start deeming ourselves that we matter, and we start putting actions and practices into place that demonstrate that to the world. That's an energetic upgrade. Not only that, so we'll attract different to us, but it will also teach those around us to start treating us like we do matter. Starts within, always within.
Absolutely. And so me, as someone who is a giver by nature, I have to realize that giving to me is not selfish, right? That if I were to step outside of myself and meet me, of course, I would immediately want to give to me whatever this person I'm meeting for the first time. When I meet MoJOE for the first time, my first thought is, hey, how can I make your life better, right? So why would I not do that when I am MoJOE? When I look in the mirror and say, MoJOE, Joe, you matter, right? So give yourself what you give to others. It's not selfish. That's actually affirming what you know to be true, and that is that you, as Kristen said, are a perfect child of God. You're the creation. God doesn't make junk, so don't treat yourself as if you are. Right. And so it's so good.
And we're all connected. So anything that we heal within ourselves is joins the collective.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
so be selfish and heal yourself because you're joining the collective. So we're doing it for other people.
Right.
It's contagious. So let it be. Let it spread. Let's start a happy demic. Let's start a healthy demic.
That's a great point, that by taking care of myself, I'm taking care of others as well.
So good.
That's not an either or, it's a both and. All right, as I'm not surprised, we've gone through an hour. It felt like 10 minutes. It's so good. Thank you, Stevo. Thank you, Kristen, for sharing your beautiful perspectives, your heart. If you haven't picked up these people don't just talk out of their heads like a great theory. They're talking from way down deep in their knower, in their guts. They're sharing their guts with you, which is a gift, right? It's a gift for people to share their guts with you. And
Agreed.
We're all in process. None of us have the answers, but we're seeking for them together. We come as students as much as we come as teachers. So for you that have listened, that will listen after the fact,
thank you.
Please know that you do matter, and that by loving yourself, you are loving others as well. Till next time, this is Joseph MoJOE McCarthy with Kristen Brown and Stevo Hays.
Much love, everybody.
Take care of yourself. Take care of those you love. Peace out.